Couple things to remind you of or to share with you this evening. May want to check your mailboxes. Someone said they're getting very full with Christmas cards. If you haven't checked that in a while, check your mailbox. Also, hate to make this announcement that Brother Tuck and Dolores Rhodes both have COVID and are not doing very well. Tuck is not doing, he's doing a little bit worse. So Retha asked that we pray for them and remember them in our prayers that they'll overcome that fairly quickly. And also a bit of good news, Brother Sonny Bogus was able to come home today from the hospital. So he's not going to rehab, he's coming home. So that's a good thing, and he was able to do that today. Let's think about the family. Let's think about the importance of the family that we know about. This is kind of a sobering exercise, but think about this with me for just a moment. If you were told you had 24 hours to live, 24 hours, then your life would be over, what would you spend your time doing? We might would want to go visit something we've always wanted to see. We might spend some time try to getting some things lined up for when we're not here any longer. We might try to eat a meal that we really enjoy one last time. There'd be some things we'd want to do, but no doubt in that last 24 hours of our life, we would want to call or visit people, family, friends that mean so much to us and express how much they mean to us. Why would we do that? Well, because they're important to us, right? They have value to us. And so if they have value to us in our last 24 hours, the question I have is, why do we wait till then to do that? Why don't we do that right now? If they're going to be so important in our last day, why aren't they important right now? And why don't we share with them how much we love them and appreciate them? This is a time of year in which we think a lot about family. The holidays coming around. Maybe there's going to be some family members that you don't normally see very much, but they'll probably be at your home or you're at their home. Or maybe there's some folks that live a long ways off and they're traveling in, because we see the importance of family this time of year. And maybe the case is for you that your physical family, your earthly family that you were born into, maybe it doesn't have that much meaning. Maybe there's some disagreements there. There's some difficulties there. Maybe there's some things that have caused separations and rough feelings. Maybe it is that as you gather around the Christmas table, there's going to be some folks that aren't here with us anymore, and that brings about some pain. Regardless of what type of condition your physical family is in, realize your spiritual family is there to get you through anything and to help you through anything. And we see the value of our families are so very important. There was a study that was done, just released in the last couple of weeks, by Harvard University, one of the top universities in our country. And they listed this study of what will help you live a longer and healthier life. And there would be some things in there you expect: exercise, eating right, avoiding bad habits that would harm your health. But one of the things that they mentioned would help live a longer, healthier life might surprise you, and that is attending church services. Attending church services help you live a longer, healthier life. They found that those who attend worship services regularly are 27% less likely to have major heart issues and 21% less likely to develop cancer. Why? Because of the close relationships and social interaction that you get when you're here. You develop a family, and those encouraging, positive moments, friendships, relationships that we have help our mind, which helps our overall health. They have shown that if you have a more positive outlook and happier attitude about life, you have a better overall health. It affects your heart. It affects your lungs. It affects everything about you. And so those that attend worship, their spiritual family, are better off in the long run with even their physical life. We think about our families and they're important. And you might say, well, I'm not important. What makes a person important? Let me give you some questions here to think about, because here's how the world judges importance. Here are important people. Can you name the last 5 Super Bowl MVPs? The last 5. The most important player on the field in the Super Bowl, the biggest ball game that makes the most money on television. Can you name the last 5 MVPs? Can you name last year's? Just one of them. Probably not. I can't. All right, can you name the top 3 richest people in the world? If money makes somebody important, can you name the top 3 richest people in the world? Can you name one of them? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. What about 5 Nobel Peace Prize winners in this last year? Can you name them? What about people who won at the Grammys this year, or who won at the Oscars this year? Can you name some of them? You see, if our world says here are important people, athletes, singers, movie stars, people that have a lot of wealth and are very financially stable and they're billionaires, if those folks are important, why can't we even name a few of them? You might can name 1 or 2, but you can't name very many. Let me ask you these series of questions. Can you name somebody who helped you in a time of need this last year? Can you name somebody that you cried with this year? Somebody that you laughed with this year? Someone who helped get you through a tough time this past year? Can you name somebody who came to the funeral home? Who visited you at the hospital? Can you name somebody who was sitting around your Thanksgiving table? Can you name somebody who helped support your goals and your dreams? You see, that list is a lot easier to come up with because those are important people. They're not pro athletes. They're not movie stars. They may not have billions of dollars, but they're important because of the impact they made in your life. The family is important, physically and spiritually, because it's made up of important people. And by important people, we're talking about people who make a difference in each and every one of our lives. Let's notice a couple things about the family that the Bible highlights. Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 22, we see that family brings something of value. The text says, "Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old." Well, that's a proverb that we ought to be able to listen to and apply. We wish our world would listen to and apply, listening to the wisdom and discernment of those that are older and those who brought us into this world, those who guided us and took care of us. But most folks, when they reach a certain age, think, I don't need this sort of teaching or wisdom or guidance anymore, and would go off and try to paint their own course and winds up getting them into trouble a lot of times. We don't look at family because we think, well, these folks are going to leave me a lot of money when they're gone. These folks are really going to help me out when I need them in this spot. We look at family because of the value that they have in a lot of areas. Just to sit down and talk with, just to share a meal with, just to lend a helping hand. We're not looking at all the things that we have to gain physically or financially. We're looking at what can we gain mentally and emotionally and spiritually from the family that we have. Family brings something of value. Family also helps to meet our needs. 1 Timothy chapter 5 talks about taking care of widows. Verse 3 and 4, honor widows who are truly widows. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show godliness to their own household and to make some return to their parents, for this is pleasing in the sight of God. On down in verse 8, he'll talk about if you neglect your family, there's no use for you, is basically what he's saying. That how can you avoid taking care of your family? Because family are those that meet needs and take care of those that are around them. Family also is a place of honor. It's a place of respect. That's one of the 10 commandments that God gives Israel in Exodus chapter 20. Honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. And then on the next chapter, he says the opposite of that. Whoever curses your father and mother, he will be put to death. And that's a pretty strong statement there, that if we bring about blessings and honor and respect, you have long days. And if you do the opposite, your life is going to be required of you. The New Testament echoes that same thing in Ephesians 6. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. We look at that and we think about the kids at the Christmas party that just went caroling, and we think about the ones in our Sunday school class. But you're a child on up into life, right? For those of you who still have parents living, you're still a child. Honoring and obeying your parents is not something you do while you're just in high school. Something you do on up. Honoring your parents is a lifelong commitment there. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. We think about the importance of the family because it has value, it meets the needs of those, and it's a place of honor. You're in Genesis, I hope. Let's look at Genesis chapter 21. We're going to do a little practice here, a little overview of some things, and look at some families in Genesis. And we're going to look at some disruptions to the family, and we're going to look at the resolution to those problems. And then we're going to see what it was that they found to be so important that they are willing to put their differences aside. 3 case studies from the Old Testament, and then we'll look at one from the New Testament, and the lesson will be yours. The first one we're going to look at is that of Isaac and Ishmael, starting in Genesis chapter 21. Now remember, Isaac is this son of promise that God had told Abraham, you're going to have a child, even when he's very old in life. And Ishmael is the child that Abraham thought he was promised, right? He couldn't have a child, didn't have a child, and so he goes into Hagar, his handmaid, and has Ishmael. And God had promised a son through Sarah, his wife, so Isaac enters the picture. So these are half-brothers, family. The problem comes in Genesis chapter 21. Start there in verse 8. Genesis chapter 21 and verse 8. I'm in Exodus. I hope you're in Genesis. I knew that didn't look right. Genesis 21, starting there in verse 8. And the child grew, and he was weaned, talking about Isaac. And Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. Your Bible may say mocking or scoffing or something of that nature. Verse 10, so she said to Abraham, cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be the heir with my son Isaac. Now, we're only seeing just a glimpse of this story. We don't really know what Ishmael is doing. We don't really know the problem that's going on with him and Isaac. All our Bible says is mocking, scoffing, laughing. But apparently this is a serious enough offense that Sarah looks at this woman and this child and says, I want them out of my house. Okay, this is not like two kids teasing one another, picking on one another, and Abraham coming up and saying, boys, cut it out. You don't stop that, you're going to get a whooping. You don't do that, I'm going to take your cell phone away. Right? That's not what Abraham's doing. This is so serious that Abraham says, look at these people that have been a part of my life, look at my son, and get out. Go. So much so that Hagar and Ishmael will almost die in the wilderness if God doesn't help take care of them and provide for them. This is a serious problem. We don't know what the problem is, but apparently there's something that's pretty serious here. We don't see Isaac and Ishmael get back together any other time in the Bible except for one other moment. Ishmael spends his life somewhere, Isaac spends his life somewhere else. The two do not come together any other time in the Bible except for Genesis chapter 25. What could be so important that happens in Genesis 25 that these two brothers who had this big problem come back together? Well, notice it. Genesis chapter 25, start in verse 7. These are the days of the years of Abraham's life, 175 years. Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered his people. Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, east of Mamre, a field that Abraham purchased with the Hittites. There Abraham was buried with Sarah his wife. We think about this problem that they've had, and we don't know what the problem is, but they're willing to come back together to do what? Honor your father and mother. The same thing that God had told, or will tell, Israel in Exodus, part of the Great Commandments. We think about family, we think about problem solving, and sometimes that implies that we have to use our priorities. This is going to be true of our physical families, but together tonight, let's think about our spiritual family. Guess what? There's going to be times we have disagreements. There's going to be times we don't see eye to eye. There's going to be some times that we don't like the color of the carpet, or we do like the color of the carpet. Maybe that's a sore subject, I don't know. No, I think the carpet's great. We're glad to be back in here, right? There's going to be times in which we don't agree on something. We don't see something eye to eye. We have these problems, these disagreements, but guess what? There's priorities here because the family has value. The family is a place of honor. And so you and I may not see something eye to eye, but we need to remember our priority is God. We need to remember our priority is the church. We need to remember our priority is putting our differences aside for things that really and truly matter at the end of the day. Families focus on priorities, physical families and spiritual families. We see that in Isaac and Ishmael. Let's move on to Isaac's children, into Jacob and Esau. We'll go to Genesis chapter 27. And really we need to read the entirety of the chapter, but you're probably familiar with it or vaguely familiar with it. Jacob and Esau are the children of Isaac, and Esau's the oldest, supposed to receive the birthright. He's the one that's supposed to carry on the family blessing, so forth. So when Isaac gets old in years, he's supposed to pass on this family blessing to the oldest son, Esau. However, there's been a little plan between Jacob and his mother to steal the birthright from the oldest son and Esau. And so they enact this big plan, this big scheme, and Esau initially had offered this. He had accepted it. He had traded the birthright for a bowl of soup, right? And so he was kind of in on it himself, but this big scheme of deception and all takes place. And so we kind of pick up at the end of that story in Genesis chapter 27, begin there in verse 41. This is after all that deception has taken place. It says, Now Esau hated Jacob because the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, The days of mourning for my father are approaching, then I will kill my brother Jacob. But the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. She sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, Behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. Verse 43. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Laban, my brother, in Haran, and stay with him a while until your brother's fury turns away. You've got this problem. this disagreement, this deception, this big scheme. We would almost call it a prank, but it goes to extremes. So much so that Jacob receives this blessing by which he can't give back, by which Isaac can't take back and give to Esau, even though it was a lie, a deceiving act. And so you've got Esau in his anger saying, the day that my father is going to die is coming quickly. But as soon as that's over, I'm going to kill my brother. And he's taking that seriously. That's not just some sort of figurative phrase. He's so angry that he looks at his brother and he says, I'm willing to end this. This is what it's going to come to. We fast forward in the story after they spend some time apart, and we come to Genesis chapter 33. In Genesis chapter 33, we have this meeting between the two brothers again. The first time they have seen each other since this moment by which Jacob takes off running from his brother. They've lived a life for several years apart now. Jacob has a family. He is married now. He has two wives, Leah and Rachel, and they have children and herds and all these folks that are part of his life now. They've grown up, in a sense. Life has gone on. But here we have this meeting that happens again in Genesis 33. Start in verse 1. Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two female servants. And he put the servants with the children in front, then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went on before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near his brother. Now what does Jacob expect to happen? He looks on a hill and he sees his brother. The last time he saw him said, I'm going to kill you. He's got 400 men with him, looks like an army. And so Jacob turns around to his family and he kind of divides them up, saying if there's a war that happens, at least they won't get all of us, right? You can go this way and you can go that way, and we've kind of got this strategy. And when Esau comes with his swords and weapons, let's try to split up so that at least some of us survive this attack, right? Verse 4, but Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. We think about the family. Oftentimes we have to focus on our priorities, but there's going to be times we have to focus on pardon. Times we have to focus on forgiveness. Times in which someone does something wrong to me and I'm going to have to be the bigger person and forgive them. It doesn't mean that everything's right. It doesn't mean that I'm okay with it, but it means that sometimes I forgive and move on. That there may be nothing they can do to make it right, but I'm the bigger person and accept that. And I welcome forgiveness to be a part of my life, because families are made up of humans and humans are made up of mistakes. And so mistakes are part of families, spiritual and physical. And there's going to be times we have to learn to forgive and move on from that. That's what we learned from Jacob and Esau. Let's now move to one of Jacob's children, and that of Joseph, and dealing with his brothers. Genesis chapter 37, once again, we really need to read the entirety of the chapter, but I'm sure you're familiar with part of the life of Joseph. Joseph is one of the favorite children, if not the favorite child of his father. And so he has a lot of blessings that come his way, but with that comes a lot of jealousy. His brothers don't like him. In fact, Joseph has this coat that's made of different colors. We oftentimes say it's made of different types of fabric. There's something special about the coat, regardless of its construction. And he's the only one that gets it. On Christmas morning, Joseph opens this coat and nobody else opens up anything. I'm talking figuratively, of course. But Joseph is the favorite child, and his brothers become very upset by that. Notice verse 18. Genesis 37, starting in verse 18. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see that what will become of his dreams. But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of the hand to restore him to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him in a pit. The pit was empty and there was no water in it. And as you keep reading in the story, there's a group of slave traders that pass by. And what's interesting about that, verse 27, do you see the descent of those slave traders? Who is their father? They're Ishmaelites. That same Ishmael that was kicked out of the house earlier, that same Ishmael that was the child that wasn't supposed to be because of Abraham and Hagar rather than Abraham and Sarah, that whole kind of episode is coming back to life. And so here you have these troublemakers from Ishmael that wind up being slave traders that Joseph is sold to, carried to Egypt, and we know the rest of Joseph's story. We got a problem here. There's some jealousy. There's some anger, so much so that we're going to kill him. Well, let's not kill him. Let's just strip him of this robe, throw him in a pit, sell him to slave traders. There's a problem here. But we have a resolution that happens in chapter 45. We've advanced several years now, just as we have in all of our other stories we've looked at. Now Joseph is quite a bit older, quite a bit wiser, and has a lot more power. He has risen to power in Egypt. He is protecting the area from the famine that God had told Joseph. God put Joseph in this place for that very reason. And now, as karma would have it, or maybe we need to use the word as providence would have it, here comes Joseph's brothers right back to him in chapter 45 to find grain to the famine. Genesis 45, verse 3. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, please. And they came near, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Notice verse 5. Now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. Joseph looks back and he says, you remember, I have every right to be angry with my family. I've got every right to not welcome them for Christmas. I've got every right to hold hard feelings. They threw me in a pit. They sold me to slaves. I wound up being in prison in Egypt because of all the things that my mean old brothers did to me. Joseph has every right to be angry with them, but he's not. And he even tells them, don't be angry with yourselves. Why? Because as he looks back, he says, this was all part of God's plan. Yeah, there were some really bad moments, but there were some really good moments as well. And the entire area, the entire population, including Joseph and his family, are going to live because Joseph is in power and can prepare for this famine. If Joseph's not high up in Egypt, there's going to be no way that there's going to be enough grain collected to prepare for this famine that has hit this area. God sent me here to preserve life. As you look at your family, as you look back, there's some really good times. There's some really bad times. But God's painting that picture with every stroke, getting you ready to where you are now and to where you will be. Maybe you're not at the end. Maybe you're not at Genesis 45. Maybe you're still in the pit. Maybe you're on a slave gang on your way to Egypt. You may be not at the end of your story yet. But that doesn't mean that God's not taking you somewhere that He wants you. That God's not putting you somewhere in the future where He wants you. As we look back, there's a lot of reasons we could be angry and mad. There's a lot of reasons we could be glad. But everything that happens is because God is putting us where He wants us. We've looked at a grandfather, a father, and a son, or however you want to put them in their genealogy, and guess what? Every part of their families had problems. But also every part of their stories had a resolution as well. We focus on our priorities, we focus on pardon, and we look at God's providence. Let's look at one passage in the New Testament, and then our lesson will be complete. Let's go to the book of John as we think about the life of Jesus. How does Jesus handle problems with His family? Well, in John chapter 7, you see Jesus with His physical family. And in John chapter 7, you've got His brothers that are here, and they're trying to, I guess you could say, tease Jesus or trying to trap Him as the religious leaders were. John chapter 7 in verse 3, it says, so His brothers said to Him, leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples may also see the works you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. His brothers are saying, hey, if you really think you're the Christ, if you really think you're the Son of God, go prove it. Go down to this big area where there's a lot of people and show them who you are. Do a little show and tell. Demonstrate for them. Don't do these things in secret. Jesus in verse 5, notice the text says, for not even His brothers believed in Him. So Jesus says in verse 6, my time has not yet come, but your time is always here. And the text continues from there. You see, Jesus has a problem with His brothers. That they don't believe in Him is the main problem. Now they will in the future. That's why we have the New Testament book of James. He's one of Jesus' brothers, winds up becoming a believer after the resurrection and goes on to become a leader in the church. But while Jesus is on earth, He's got a problem with His family. His family doesn't support Him. His family doesn't believe in Him. His family doesn't help Him. His family leaves Him out to dry from time to time. But Jesus finds resolution in John chapter 19. In John chapter 19, Jesus is hanging on a cross. And Jesus focuses on family. Notice what it says in John 19, verse 25. But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, that would be John, he said to him, "Woman, behold your son." And then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home. Jesus, being the oldest son, is in a predicament here because he is the one in charge of taking care of his mother. Remember Exodus? Honor your father and mother, right? And so here is Jesus who's leaving life, who's leaving the world before his mother does. That's not typically how things work, right? Parents usually leave before the children do. That's not always the case, but that's the case that's happening here, that here we have Jesus leaving life before Mary does. And so who is he going to leave to take care of his mother? He doesn't trust his brothers. They don't believe in him. They don't have faith in him. They're not following him as the Christ, so he looks at someone else. He looks at someone that's not physically family, but who is spiritually family. He looks at John and says, "I trust you to take care of my mother." When it comes to family, sometimes we need to do what Jesus does, and that's have the Proverbs 18 effect. There's a friend that sticks closer than a brother, right? Jesus' own brothers weren't very close to him, but there was a friend in his disciple John who was. And Jesus looked at John and said, "I'm giving you charge to take care of my family." Maybe it is this evening that your physical family is maybe not all that great. Maybe you have problems there. Maybe your family's great. But even better than that is a spiritual family. A friend, a person sitting on the pew next to you, a person you ate lunch with today, a person that you went singing Christmas carols with, a person that you sang Christmas carols to. Spiritual family. Folks that help get you out of the pit. Folks that help get you out of slavery. Folks that help carry you through life. Friends that stick closer than a brother. We think about this and we come to a close and ask the question, how do we uphold the values of the family? Well, here's the things we've already looked at. We honor, we encourage, we forgive, we represent. We honor our family physically and spiritually. We encourage our family, our physical family, our spiritual family. Many times we'll have to forgive them. Maybe most importantly, we represent them. You carry your family name with you. You always will. When people read newspapers about you, when people see your name on anywhere or hear your name ties you to your family name. But you also wear another name. That name is Christian. Ties you to your spiritual family. How are you representing the family? The family has value. Are we making that value even greater? Or are we degrading it because of the way we live? I say I'm a Christian, but I don't represent that by my values. This evening, maybe you're not a part of God's family. You've never put Christ on in baptism. Maybe you've done that, but you're no longer faithful to the Lord. Tonight, if we can help you in understanding the value of the family and being a part of God's family, why don't you come as we stand together and sing?
I must tell Jesus all of my trials. I cannot bear these burdens alone. When we're distressing, kindly will help me. Fear loves and cares for his own. I must tell Jesus, I must tell Jesus, I cannot bear
297. Sing the song. If anyone did not have the opportunity to take the Lord's Supper, it has been reserved for you. Main lobby to the right, first class to the left. This Brother Kerry gets to have a closing prayer. I want to be a worker for the Lord. I want to love and trust His holy word. I want to sing and pray and be busy every day in the vineyard of the Lord. I will work, I will pray in the vineyard of the Lord. I will work, I will pray, I will labor every day in the vineyard of the Lord.
We got somebody like this, right? Add just a little bit to this one.
Let us pray.
Come on,
Our Father in heaven, we thank Thee for this day and all the blessings of it. We thank Thee for allowing us to come here tonight, study less of Your Word, sing songs of praise unto You. This time we want to pray for the sick of this community and all over the world. Restore their health if it be Thy will. Be with the ones who have lost loved ones. Just comfort them and give them strength. So we leave here tonight, just help us to always say and do the things that will bring honor and glory to Your name. For it's in Your Son's name we pray. Amen.
because it's come out of the house today to come to church, and I turned back and locked it. And when I turned back around, my backyard was full of angels. I'm about angels, all sizes and shapes. I've never been so surprised over in my life. And they sang some songs. And it was very, very nice. I'll never forget it. Thank you very much.